Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elevating Your Life. So happy to have you with us today, and I am so happy to share just such a fantastic, amazing guest with you today. Today, we are joined by John Campbell. He is a 76-year-old graduate of the Grand University of Life. I love it. He is author of the book, Miracle Relationships, A Path to Freedom and Joy. And he was born in India. He had no schooling until his family moved back to England in 1953. At 17, he joined the Merchant Navy as a navigating officer cadet. He became a captain at age 26 before working in Nigeria for 25 years. John hit rock bottom in 1997 through drinking and stressful business activities. As a result, he admitted himself to a rehabilitation center. After 5 weeks of deep healing and achieving a spiritual awakening, he left rehab. He then resigned from his Nigerian businesses, going on to train as a hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner. Eventually, A Course in Miracles found its way into John's life, and he became a dedicated student and teacher of this metaphysical work. John's ongoing teaching has led him to write this book and give talks worldwide with his wife, Dr. Ann Campbell. John and his 6 children and Ann share their time between England and Spain. John, I'm just so honored to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very, very welcome, Paula. Thank you so much. And if I may just, I want to be really honest, I'm now a 77-year-old graduate of the Great University of Life. So I think they must have misplaced that number. So I'm actually, that's my body age anyway, that's all.
Yeah, the body age, yep. Yeah, I'm 19 forever. That's my attitude.
Yeah, that's it. That's good. That's the way it should be, yeah.
Oh, well, John, if you'd like to share anything else about your background and then maybe what triggered you to write your fantastic book, I would love to hear that.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Well, it's it's quite a story, and like everything, it's been a journey. I never set out, never thought that's how my life would to run. But there's an old saying: if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So, I made him laugh quite a bit. As you said, I was born in India and raised in Africa, South Africa, Kenya, Malaya, and didn't have any schooling, which was a great gift to me. A great gift. I realized that. My mother was very heavily alcoholic already by the time I was born, I think, and so she was spent most of the time in the hotels and the bars and what have you. And I was just free. I used to play with the natives, and play with the animals, and life was good. Enjoyed it. And then we came back to England. For me, the very first time I'd seen my home country. I was already 7 years of age, and it was a shock. I went to this thing called school. And that was the first thing I didn't really take to very much. I came home from school the first day and I said to my mother, well, that was interesting. What do I do tomorrow? And she said, you go there every day. And I said, what? I can't go there every day. Anyway, I eventually knuckled down and went through the schooling system. Life was tough. Life was pretty tough at home. I had a very keen sense at a young age that mum and dad were not the best of friends. So as far as relationship models were, that wasn't the greatest thing. It probably showed me what I didn't want. Anyway, I thought the best thing was to get out of there as quick as I could. And I went off and joined the Merchant Navy. But before that, when I was young, I tell this because it had such a big impact in my later life. My mother's, she would keep me off school to be her companion, at a young age when I was like 10 years of age. And she would take me shoplifting. She was drunk at the time, and we'd go into the store and she would keep the shopkeeper talking, and my job was to put the good stuff, the swag, into the bag. And when we got out of the store, of course, what did she do? She gave me a huge amount of love. So I made a connection unconsciously. I didn't understand any of this stuff at the time, of course, but I made a connection there, a very, very deep, unconscious connection that if I did illegal things, I would receive love. And we all know where everyone's looking for love, mostly in the wrong places, as I found out. But that's what I developed that. So I started stealing as a young boy and got into all that kind of stuff. And when I went to sea, I was always into smuggling extra cigarettes, whiskey, and all that kind of stuff. And I always remember I used to get a buzz, and I realize now that's because I was hooking into the experiences I had when I'd go shoplifting with my mother. Anyway, I went to sea. I loved being at sea. I loved the freedom, and I worked my way through the ranks. Really studied hard, and I became a captain when I was 26, and I was towing oil rigs. I always worked for American companies once I got my master's license, because I enjoyed working with the Americans. I really did. They were mainly from the South, Houston and Louisiana, and once I'd been captain for a while, I was always of that kind of thing that I was really fired up until I really mastered something. The minute I mastered something, I wanted to move on, to the next thing. So after I'd become a proficient captain and I'd been used to towing oil rigs and working the oil rigs, I wanted to be a manager. And the company told me that the only operation they could offer me was Nigeria. And I thought, oh, that'll be great. I know Africa. I was raised in South Africa and I was raised in Kenya. But I didn't know then that Nigeria was very different. Anyway, I took the offer to go out there because it was an opportunity to get off the boats and get into management. And in Nigeria, I was already drinking heavily by that time. And in Nigeria, my drinking escalated. I'd already had one marriage, which broke down, and I had a beautiful daughter from that marriage, Jackie. And I left her and left her mum, got divorced, and went to work in Nigeria. And my remit from the company I was working for was to stop the smuggling of diesel oil that used to go on between the boats. It was a common practice. And I went out there with the best of intentions. I was going to clean up this whole stuff, until one day my life was threatened by one of these illegal oil traders, the business I was trying to stop. And he turned around to me and said, "You try to kill my business, I'll kill you." And I thought, well, you know what? I might rethink this. I might just turn a blind eye to this, And gradually I got into all sorts of, illegal trading. And it was just, my life had become so out of alignment to who I really was. And I had no idea then, what was going on. I didn't know anything about subconscious mind or whatever. But it just got to a point where I eventually married again. And I had ended up having 5 more beautiful children. And then in 1997, I hit a rock bottom. I used to own, and I was vice chairman of a professional soccer club in England, football we call it. And I got removed from the board because I was a bit of a pain. And when that happened, it was like my right arm had turned, because I'm a massive follower of this club. And my drinking escalated to such a point, and I put out a call for help. I literally put out a call for help, and I didn't know that at the time, that whenever we ask for help, we always receive it, always. I am so centered in that understanding now. It's with me all the time. But at that time, I didn't know it, and I got the answer very, very clearly. And I was led to connect with a guy who'd been a drinking buddy of mine in Nigeria, and I hadn't seen him for years and years and years. And suddenly he calls me up out of the blue and wants to meet up, and we met up. And I said, what are you going to have to drink? And he said, oh, I don't drink anymore. And I went, what do you mean you don't drink? Something wrong? And then he told me his story. I didn't want to know, I couldn't wait to get rid of this guy because I was still drinking. Anyway, we went our different ways. He told me his story, but the seed had been sown kind of thing, you know what I mean? And then I really hit a rock bottom a couple of years after that. And suddenly I was in a car and I heard a voice. And I'd actually written in a book. I found a copy of the book by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. And I'd found an old copy of it in an airport in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. And I remember taking this book and I was so blown away by it. And I wrote in the front of the book all the faults I'm drinking too much, my marriage is a sham, I'm dishonest, but I want to change. And I signed it and I dated that book. And a couple of months after, I was in this taxi going from Tripoli to Tripoli airport in Libya. And I suddenly heard a voice in my head, and it was so loud, I thought the guy was in the taxi saying, phone Terry, which was the name of this guy who I'd met up with for the first time after many years. And when I got home, I called Terry, and he said, oh, I knew you'd call. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I could see the struggle you're in because I was sober. And he said, I knew you'd call. I didn't know how long it would take, but it's taken 2 years. Don't worry about it. He said, here's a number. Phone this number. Of course, I wanted to know all about it, And eventually, I phoned the number, and it was a rehabilitation center. And I admitted myself. Nobody had to push me. I was in so much emotional pain. And I went in, and wow, he said it would change your life. It certainly changed my life. And I went in there and I got into 12 step, into AA. And I got into spiritual literature for the first time. I'd never read anything of substance, and it completely blew me away. I made a decision. I was never going back to that old corrupt business I was in. So when I came out, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was certainly not going back into that. And of course, it caused big shockwaves, with my wife at the time, the family. They had always known me as this swashbuckling kind of guy, which was all a big facade. Underneath it, I was like a scared little kid. Of course, the alcohol covered that up. Anyway, I went to college and I started to study therapeutic counseling, and I read some really, really good books and started to understand healing. And I came across a book called Healing the Child Within by Charles Whitfield. And when I read that, I said, I've got one of those inside me. I want to heal that. And I went and did an amazing course called the Hoffman Process. It's all over the world. It originated in the US by a guy called Bob Hoffman, and it's now spread all over the world. And I went and did this course, and it was amazing because it was all about forgiveness. My mother had been dead 21 years when I did the course, and my father had been dead 27 years. And when my mother had died, I had still not made peace with her. I was very angry still with her. I didn't have any real relationship with her. And this course completely healed that. In 7 days, I could tell you, it was just an amazing thing. And for the first time in my life, I felt both my parents equal inside me, because, we are 50% our mother and 50% our father. And I realized how I had allowed my experience with my mother to impact my relationship with women. So that was massive, and it started me on the journey of learning. As you mentioned in my intro, I studied, I became a hypnotherapist and an NLP practitioner. And I was searching, I really was searching. And eventually the marriage ended. It had to end. It was in bad shape. We tried everything, we went to therapy and all the rest of it. But I now accept that the time was up, And that was the toughest thing for me, to actually leave my 5 children, especially that I still had young children. 3 of them were older, grown up, but we had a 10-year gap between the first 3 and the last 2. So it was really tough, and I had a lot of guilt, about that. And eventually I came across A Course in Miracles. And I'd heard Wayne Dyer. By this time, I was following Wayne Dyer, and Louise Hay and
Mm-hmm.
people like that. And they all, every time I'd hear them talk, they'd always mention Course in Miracles, Course in Miracles. And I thought, well, I must look at this Course in Miracles. And I got the book. I didn't do anything with it. I couldn't understand it. It was a thick book. Pages were wafer thin. I thought it was very much like the Bible. But I just knew, for some reason, I knew that I needed to study this book. So I kept the book. And in those days, I had a habit of giving books away that I'd read. But I kept hold of this book. I didn't really understand it. And then I went to a talk by Wayne Dyer in London, and he was talking about a new book that had just hit the bookstores called The Disappearance of the Universe by a guy called Gary Renard. And he used to throw books out into the audience that he thought were going to be big books. And I read this book, The Disappearance of the Universe, and it was amazing because it completely explained the real meaning of A Course in Miracles, and it was such a help. And I decided that that was going to be because I'd always had this feeling of searching, Paulie. I was always searching for something. And as soon as I found this, excuse me, that feeling of searching stopped, and it's never come back. Doesn't mean I haven't, I don't do other things, but that yearning, that searching, knowing there was something I needed to know, that left me. I knew I'd found the answer to life. And the book really transformed my whole attitude towards relationships, explained how they work. I made peace, with my former wife, my kids, and everything. And
Beautiful.
And eventually, and it got me on this path so that once I always make a joke that I was 67 when I realized I was now mature enough to have an intimate relationship.
And I
And
mean,
once I did,
you come with, such a perspective that so many people, can maybe relate to, and the fact that you have gone through what you've gone through. You share so many wonderful perspectives and informations in your book, such as the most important relationship is the one we have with ourselves. I mean, that is so true.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's everything. And the reality is, I won't beat around the bush. I was suffering from immense self-hatred, and I think that's what a lot of people are suffering from, even though they don't realize it. That's what it was. Not feeling good enough. I wasn't good enough. My self-hatred was off the charts, so that needed healing.
Yes.
And it was the Course in Miracles which really healed that for me.
And there are miracles out there, aren't they? I mean, so many things. And just the fact that we can, as you speak of, reclaim our joy, that can be done. Even when you just think, oh, nothing else can be done, we can reclaim our joy. There's so many miracles out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I can tell you now, when I was at the height of what the world would say of my success, I had a 6-bedroom mansion in the English countryside. I owned a professional football club. I was vice chairman. I was earning oodles of money, and I had all this stuff. And every night I would pray. I would go into the bathroom en suite. I'd get on my knees, and as I had my head over the toilet bowl vomiting, I would just say, God, please don't make me wake up in the morning. And then when I did wake up in the morning, because I didn't have the courage to actually do anything about it, but when I woke up in the morning, I'd put my camouflage back on, my suit and my tie and my briefcase, and get in my Mercedes and go off. And that's how I was. And, I had more camouflage than there is, and I was suffering so much. And then eventually, it took me time and dedication, of healing work, realizing that joy is our natural state. And I was always depressed, and joy is our natural state. And if we're not feeding it, it's never to do with anything outside of us, because I'd gone through my whole life thinking, oh, well, if my mother had been better and my father had been better and this and this and this. But in the end, when I started to learn these principles and started to take 100% responsibility for everything in my life started to change.
Oh,
And eventually, when I eventually met my present wife, Annie, 10 years ago, um, because it's been such a incredible relationship, one of joy, it's conflict free, we both take 100% responsibility for our full stack of emotions, and we use the relationship for healing, which is what I talk about in the book. And we laugh a lot, laughter is such a massive healing thing. And of course, it's genuine laughter now coming from joy. And it was that then, in fact, I think I write about it in the book. I was traveling in a Greyhound bus up to Vancouver, and I was sat next to a woman from Croatia, and she wanted to know what I did, and I explained I was a relationship coach and what have you. And she said, "Oh, maybe you can help me with my relationship history." So she started to tell me her relationship history and said, "Could I shed some light on it?" So she was asking, so it wasn't as though it was unsolicited advice. So I explained to her very briefly about the family system and a healthy family system, which I talk about in chapter 8 of the book. And afterwards, she said, "You've just explained my whole life to me in 20 minutes and you know nothing about me. You should write a book." And that's what got me thinking. I thought, well, if one person can end up having a kind of relationship and life that I have today, that would have been worth it. So that's what prompted me to write the book.
And your book is so fantastic and has so much in it that can help so many, that can enlighten and help so many of us. I just have to give you a heartfelt thank you, John. I really do.
Oh, you're very welcome, Paula. It's a joy. I mean, when I hear people come back to me, and the most uh, common comment I've received from people is that they said, "Oh my God, it was like a light went on in their mind. It was like everything was an aha moment, understanding." So that's very, 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 very rewarding for me to hear that, to get that kind of feedback. And I do give personal, examples in the book, um, and the importance of doing this inner work. Understanding how our unconscious, deep unconscious programs, which we all have, and the book is not about blaming our parents or blaming anybody, not blaming the government, blaming nobody. But the fact is, we get programmed.
Yeah.
And the good news about that is, just like a computer, we can change the program.
Yeah.
And it's
anytime.
available at any age, anytime.
Any age, right now, we can change the program.
Right
and
now.
Oh my gosh, isn't that something to celebrate, John? It really is.
Absolutely. 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 Absolutely.
That just makes us realize it's
Yeah.
never too late to go down a different path. Never too late.
Exactly. And I've learned so many lessons, Paula. First of all, I was so enthusiastic. I wanted everybody to have this. Right? Like for me, if I've found a pot of gold, I want to share the pot of gold. I don't want to keep it to myself.
Yeah.
And one of the big lessons I had to learn was people tend to only change when the pain of staying the same gets bigger than their fear of change. And it's not up to me to decide when they're ready. So nowadays I really learned the lesson. So now I wait for people, what I call leaning forward. People will come forward and they'll ask a question or they'll ask something, and then I can share the knowledge. But eventually I think everyone gets to the point of realizing that there has to be a better way.
Yes. Oh,
Really
John,
do.
yes, yes. Please share. We have just a few minutes left in the show. Please share your website and anything else you'd like to say about Miracle Relationships, A Path to Freedom and Joy. Everyone, you have to check it out. What last words do you want to share with everyone?
Well, what I'd love to share with everybody is, first of all, to understand whatever your story is, it's only a story, and there's no such thing as a failed relationship. You know, a lot of people come out of a marriage or a long-term relationship, they feel so bad and guilty, they think they've failed. No, 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 no. Look upon it as a lesson and a blessing because you're going to have learned so much from it. And the other thing is, it's never too late. As you were just saying, it is never too late. You can find joy and love and peace and fun and at any age. It has no limit. So I want to give what I'd love, but more than anything, for the Miracle Relationships, A Path to Freedom and Joy, the book, to do is to give people hope. If the one thing I'd love is to give them hope and to understand who they are and their real essence. You know, they are beautiful, beautiful children of the universe that deserve to be loved, that are loved, and to let go of any belief in that they've ever committed a sin. Instead, they've made mistakes like every single person that's ever drawn breath. And there's a big difference between making a mistake and thinking you've committed a sin. Because a sin will always demand punishment, and a mistake only calls for correction. And it's by
Oh,
understanding the difference between those two.
oh, wow. Yeah. A mistake just calls for correction. Oh, I love that. I love that.
And
Oh,
people sometimes they say, "Oh, what is it? A miracle? What is about? What is a miracle? Is that religious?" But no, when you realize the term miracle is used as a change in perception. That's what the miracle is. I mean, you know, my ex-wife and I had a very toxic divorce. I didn't want it that way, but she was still hurting and whatever you. Anyway, all I did was I kept doing the forgiveness processes. I kept doing the forgiveness processes. And 3 weeks ago, she came out here and spent 10 days here with her partner and with Annie and I. That's a miracle.
that's a
And you
miracle.
know, my kids even put something on Facebook. You know, they said, you know, if anybody thinks that they're not a miracle, this is a proof of it because they remember what it was like when we split up. It was not easy for them, you know? But
Oh,
it's
John, you are just an inspiration. You are. I am so grateful to you and so grateful to share you with my audiences. Everybody, you
oh,
can learn more at miraclesrock.com. And this has been just so fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. Love, hugs, and blessings.
you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And you can get the book from any Amazon site and also all the major bookstores like Barnes and Noble, Waterstones in Europe, etc. And Amazon, of course. And I'd love you to have it. And please
Everybody,
leave a review. I want to hear everything.
yes, check out John Campbell, everyone. Thank you so much. Love, hugs, and blessings, everyone.